Hello everyone, welcome to the Kevin Lee Social. Thank you for tuning in. What initially began as an 8-part series interviewing entrepreneurs to share and inspire how they've successfully pivoted during COVID-19, I have decided not only to continue this series, but also to expand on the scope to understand and learn about people's craft, philosophy, the challenges they face in the industry, and their favorite failures that have helped shape them to become who they are today. By going deeper and understanding different thought leaders, businesses, and industries, the idea is to help cross-pollinate ideas applicable in your life and inspire action in this new norm we live in. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. Before we get on with the show, today's podcast is sponsored by Altitude Tea. Altitude Tea specializes in rare and exotic teas you can't find on supermarket shelves. Teas grown on high altitudes are more nutrient-dense due to the cold nights and misty peaks that slows the growth of the tea plant, leading to a higher concentration of aromatic oils and richer flavors. They are located in Waterloo and they do private tea ceremonies where you can learn how to drink tea mindfully using a traditional gongfu set and have over 20 varieties of tea to choose from. For our listeners, you can use the code BEYOND at checkout for 15% off. Today, we have Brittany Anderson. She's the president and partner at Sweet Financial Partners. Brittany is also the co-founder of Dare to Dream Enterprises and the co-host of the Ultimate Advisor podcast. As a president and partner of a top-ranked financial services firm, she has taken her business building and team engaging insights and has worked with CEOs, entrepreneurs, business owners, and authors. With over a decade of industry experience, Brittany is a co-creator of the Ultimate Advisor Coaching and Ultimate Advisor Mastermind platforms. Her insights have been featured in national media outlets such as the Huffington Post, Women, Inc., and Forbes magazine. As an influential speaker and author, Brittany Anderson has spoken at million-dollar roundtables, Raymond James National Conference, EWAS, and others on showing up each day to be more than a title, more than a label, and pursuing a life that fulfills their purpose. Everyone, please help me welcome Brittany Anderson. Hi, Brittany. How are you today?
Wonderful. I'm having a wonderful day.
Lovely to meet you, and thank you for coming on to the show.
I'm truly honored to be on.
We've met through Justin, and this is great to meet like-minded people and connect with them. So I'm grateful, Justin Breen, for introducing yourself to me.
Yes, and likewise.
Brittany, I'd like to start off with sharing with the audience your core business, Sweet Financial Dreams. Can you share a bit about the business with the audience, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with Sweet Financial. It was actually Sweet Financial Services at the time, it's been about almost 14 years ago, actually founded by Brian Sweet. We've gone back and forth on the year, but we think it's 1987 is when the true business founding had happened. Basically, a little bit of the history of the company to bring us up to speed on where we are today. Brian started in his early years in the insurance industry and quickly realized that he was not in love with, number one, just what went into life insurance, but also with how transactional it was in nature. Was definitely looking to foster more of the long-term relationships with the people that he worked with. Ended up getting into more of the investment management space, which then evolved into full comprehensive wealth planning, which now today, and with a growing team, has become much more encompassing than that, where we have a full-on trademarked process called the Dream Architect, where yes, we have the wealth planning, and that is absolutely the core of our business, but our focus and our primary attention is on helping people pursue their dreams. So my journey here, I actually started as a concierge service associate. I was supporting one of the advisors on the team. I was fresh out of college. I had actually been working full-time while going to college in more of a corporate environment. And at the time, I realized it at a really early age that corporate life wasn't for me. I didn't like how restricted it was. I didn't like how there was such a tight chain of command and how everything had to be I like to think outside the box and generate new ideas. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but I think that was the entrepreneurial nature in me that was coming out. Ended up taking a chance and applied for this position that I really didn't know much about. Over time, I actually ended up moving into more of the director of operations role. I had missed the leadership component, which I could tell you a little bit of a funny story there and how that evolved, but ended up then going into the chief operating officer and now am president and one of 4 partners in the firm. So it's been a really fun, a really exciting journey, and one that has absolutely generated a lifetime of learning.
Wow. Talk about working your way up, Brittany.
Yeah, it feels fast when you talk about it like that.
Wow. But 14 years, you said, was that right? 14 years?
Yeah, yep, 14 years.
Wow, what a journey. Congratulations on the discipline and tenacity. You've made it to the top and now a partner. Incredible. What an inspiring story.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I wonder if it's something that when you started as concierge there, was it related to something in your childhood blueprint that you wanted to grow up financially savvy, or was it more of it worked itself out as you started your journey?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask that because when I was in college, if somebody would, and even in high school, honestly, if somebody would have said that I was going to take the path of being in the financial planning world, I would have probably been like, no, I don't think that's really where my journey lies. But I do think back to when I was a kid, I grew up in a single parent household, a divided household, and I watched my mom, who was raising my brother and I, always struggle financially, doing it on her own, really trying to juggle everything. And I remember one point in my life where I was probably about 8 years old and had a clear line of sight into my mom's bedroom. And I look in there and I could see her sitting on her bed and I could see her bills kind of laid out and she had her checkbook out. And I remember she was crying. And at that point in time, she wasn't sure if she was going to be able to put a roof over our head and food on the table and keep the lights on and take care of our activities and everything else that we were involved with. And even at such a young age, that stuck with me and that resonated. And in that moment, and as I got older, I really decided that regardless of what happens in my life, regardless of who enter it, who leaves it, how the chips fall, I knew I wanted to have control. And I knew that I wanted to generate opportunities that I didn't have. And I knew from a really young age also that I wanted to have a family and I wanted kids of my own. And I didn't want them to see that same struggle. And I didn't want them to have to experience that. So, on the one token, I'm eternally grateful because I feel that what I witnessed and what I went through really shaped who I am today. But at the same time, it also helped me make decisions in my life that were maybe a little bit different than what my mom would have made or my dad had made or whatever the case was. So yeah, now that I look back and I'm a little bit older and have a few more years behind me, I definitely can see that this was a path that was meant for me and there's purpose behind it.
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story. It's
Absolutely.
inspiring to hear through the struggles of growing up to the woman you've made yourself to be today. Incredible.
Thank you.
And talking about now that you're on the other end of the story, being more successful and rising to the top, what is your definition of living a rich life?
To me, living a rich life, the first word that comes to mind is abundance. And I think what supports that or what goes behind that is identifying what freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of attention, freedom of energy, what all of that means and how that can support an abundant lifestyle. It comes down to choice. So when I think about a rich life, I think there's so many different connotations that could fall behind that. Growing up, you think about it from a child's perspective. And I think at that point, living a rich life is a life filled with love. And then it carries forward and you decide that, hey, you know what? Having freedom of choice, again, freedom of that time, attention, energy, having that freedom of money too. I think that oftentimes, and I won't digress here too much, but I think that a lot of times that women in particular are a little bit fearful or more reserved in talking about a drive towards money and how that plays a part in their life. So for me, when I think about that definition, call it rich life, call it abundance, call it whatever you want, money is a tool and it's a tool to get me to a place in my life that I want. And I'll share, actually, I was speaking with a gentleman recently and he made a comment about how one of his core values or his purpose in life was to build a financial fortress around his family that was essentially indestructible. And hearing that to me it completely helped shape my own thought and my own path and really what I'm working so hard towards and what a little bit of sacrifice here and there can actually create for not just myself, not just my immediate family, but for my legacy and the impact that I want to make in the world. I think that overall, freedom, choice, abundance, those all help define a rich life.
Incredibly said, Brittany. A beautiful definition for a rich life, very diverse and abundant.
I like the play on words.
And you mentioned your conversation with, it could have been your recent clients or somebody like that, in terms of building this financial fortress around the family. And I think that's an incredible thing to have. And like you said, you're reflecting on how you would build something like that for not only your family, but your legacy. I think that goes on the minds of quite a few people. And you don't have to go into too much detail, but in terms of rolling along with that, what are some of the things that people can look out for in terms of building that perpetual wealth or financial fortress for their family? And I know it's a big question, and but it's just more of some of the broader points that people should be looking at when looking at building that wealth.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, actually. I think about from my own perspective, when I'm thinking about building wealth and creating a different trajectory for my children and my grandchildren and their kids and all of that, I think about it comes down to decision, I think. So for me, when I'm looking at opportunity, I'm constantly looking at who I can connect with. And this whole thought process, this is probably a little bit different than what most would maybe go down or what path they would take in answering this question. I think a lot of times when people are looking at creating, again, abundance or wealth for their future, people can get stuck in their own way. You're constantly in the grind of trying to figure it out. You're trying to go alone, take on that road. You want that story of how you overcame all odds and really created something beautiful and wonderful all on your own. And I think the true growth and opportunity lies in collaboration. I think about our founder, Brian Sweet, and I can honestly think back and credit a lot of my own mindset and thought process around what it takes to accumulate wealth, what it takes to build that financial fortress, to some of things that he's done in his own life. I look to him as a mentor and somebody that I so admire in that. One thing that he did is he's never been afraid to put the right butts in seats, to surround yourself with talented individuals who can free you up to focus on the things that you are exceptional at and that give you energy and excitement for the future. And really, again, it's getting out of your own way and being able to delegate so that you can create and generate opportunity. And I think one of the things for myself that I constantly am thinking about and reminding myself of is if what I'm working on isn't generating opportunity for my future, be it through some sort of a collaboration, some sort of new product creation, service creation, whatever part or whatever business this is involved with, then I'm probably doing something wrong. I'm probably doing something that needs to be either hired for or, again, delegated off or whatever. I think, again, if you're going back to that core question of what does it take to truly build that? How do you do that or create that financial fortress? It all really falls back into a path of decision and where you're putting your time and attention. There's the whole adage about the overnight success, and we can touch on that in a little bit here if you'd like, but I don't believe that to be true. It's years of grind and hard work and determination and really putting yourself in front of the right people. So a long-winded roundabout answer, but that's really what I believe you can do to accumulate wealth and to create opportunity.
Incredible answer. Thank you, Brittany. It is definitely connecting with the right people, putting the right butts in seats, and trying to create opportunity with yourself is quite a challenge. It's such an awareness piece to be able to stop and pause yourself and really to find out, okay, where am I at? Who am I spending my time with? What am I doing? Where am I missing these windfalls? And it's some great advice that you shared. I appreciate that, Brittany. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to add just one more thing there too. And this goes back to our core business at Sweet Financial. We a lot of times work with people who are already at that accumulated phase where they've already been diligent. And I think that a lot of times people think that creating wealth for their future is hard. And it's really just discipline and it's consistency and it's set it and forget it kind of mentality. Again, you could go as tactical as you want there, but I think that helps too. Or you don't have to make it hard. You don't have to make it complicated.
Yes. Great. I love that you tackled it from a mental standpoint down towards tactical.
Excellent.
And it's great that you shared some great positive advice for us. Now, being in your position, what counterintuitive advice about finances do you commonly hear circulate around?
You said contradictory advice. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll answer it backwards first. One thing that we see often is a little bit more of that fear-based mindset. People have spent years accumulating, and maybe that can mean a variety of different things. You could have somebody who was a really high earner in a certain role, job, career that they had. So they were diligent about saving and they've gotten to this certain point, or they've had a business and they've had some liquidity event and now they've got this money and want to know what to do with it. And I think oftentimes you get, especially if people are paying attention to, let's just put it where it is, the elephant in the room, where the media is at today, creating this feeling of fear and don't spend because of all the uncertainty in the world. And I think, honestly, that is a little bit counterintuitive. What we see a lot of times when people are making decisions around their finances, at least in our experience, we've seen people tend to spend a lot less versus spending too much. So I think sometimes when people are listening to that constant fear-based advice, that's make sure that you hold on to it. Don't make any purchases right now, or don't make large decisions for your future because there's so much uncertainty in the world. For us, there's so many great tools and resources out there that can help you make informed decisions, that can give you different scenarios and what ifs, that can help assess the risk that's involved. And so I think a lot of times people just listen too much to the scarcity versus again, we're going to use that A word, the abundance. They listen to things that are based more on fear versus possibility. So I think there's a little bit of controversy that happens there. Also, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, is people just tend to complicate things. It's not rocket science. If you are diligent in your savings, and you could go down to very tactical, fundamental things. Like if you're listening to this and you are working for somebody else, you're not a business owner, you're not an entrepreneur, you're working for somebody, taking advantage of your employer match. It's things like that it's like that money that's free to you, that set it and forget it. Those are things that people can do. There's definitely opportunities within your business, especially in the entrepreneurial world too, whether you have an interest in more of the long-term strategy like we do, or you are interested in real estate or whatever that looks like for you. Just being diligent about saving. One of the biggest mistakes that we've seen, especially a newer entrepreneur make, is not having any sort of savings or not taking that action. So again, when you think about some controversial advice, there's that fine line between reinvest into your business versus make sure that you're protecting yourself along the way. It goes back to that financial fortress. So those are a couple things that we've seen.
Thank you for sharing, Brittany. That's some very sound tactical advice there. And I wanted to get a bit more of your perspective there. So you were sharing there's a bit more of a fine line between protecting yourself and spending. And I believe that's probably a bit more of on a continuum, depending on where you are in your business. You're starting out.
Yeah.
Do you think it's like you've got to spend, but at the same time, got to protect yourself as well? Do you think that when you're starting out, you're obviously probably going in more of a risk base, so you're trying to spend more? Or do you think or is it the process before that is saving to make sure you've really got that solid ground first before you go out into a business? What's your perspective?
That's a great question. And I would say that I don't know that there is a right or wrong answer in this. I would say it really depends on your lifestyle, your goals, kind of where you're at in your life, what you need. I will say that if you are somebody who has a young family who is maybe trying to go out into a business on your own, or taking on some new venture, or assuming a bunch of risk, you may want to have some sort of cushion, or have your spouse that has some sort of stability, just because you have more than just your mouth to feed. I was actually just in a conversation with a gal recently talking about this very topic. And I was on a podcast interview and talking about how for her, she's, hey, I know that if I have a tight month, it's just me. I'm pretty resilient and I can find a couch to sleep on if I need to, or skimp on my meals out or whatever. But when you have a family, there's different decisions that you have to make. So you really have to assess where you're at in your life. I will say that from my own perspective, I think that when you're in the early years of creating a business, I think about, on top of the wealth planning firm, we have a coaching business. So we coach financial advisors. For years, I was coaching businesses from all walks of life, and quickly realized that was not necessarily where I wanted to be spending all of my time. But part of that was just understanding that, yes, there was good revenue and income coming into the business. But for me, it was an early stage business, and I wanted to make sure I was putting every dollar back into the business, or at least the majority of the dollars. So again, it's that fine line of in between. I had the stability of sweet financial partners and so that was absolutely great for me at the time. But I would say that when you have that early business, making sure that you may, especially if that's all you have, make smart decisions around what you actually need to pull out versus what may be a luxury. Because that whole idea of reinvesting into your business, from what my experience is and what we consistently see, you have even more opportunities for growth when you're making decisions like that. So again, it depends on your life stage.
Yeah. Personally, for myself, I've been on this cafe restaurant business venture and over the last 3 years for this particular rebrand. And we rebranded a cafe and then we've exploded it up. And it's quite busy. It tested our concept. And so we decided to go, okay, let's go all in. And we invested in a second space into a restaurant, a much larger. And our brand is building. And then now we're starting to get more and more offers around different lease spaces around different places. And these lease places are offering us contribution to help us set up and really expand the brand because they love our concept. And it's one of those things that's in my mind. I'm thinking, do I try to keep smaller and just do the 1 or 2, 3 places? Or should I continue to expand with all these offers all around the state or the country? But with so much risk because it's a challenging industry.
Yeah.
And have you watched We Crashed recently on Apple TV? It's about the story of WeWork.
No, I haven't.
WeWork, and it's starring Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway. I love these kind of biography business shows.
Yeah.
It's fun and entertaining. And
now I'm going to have to check it out because I am interested.
And it's one of those unicorn stories where they expand rapidly, but they spend more than they make. And it's one of those stories where, yes, they're pulling in lots of money, but at the same time, they're also spending more than they should. And so this kind of industry scares me a little bit because going back to what we were talking about, it's like you're reinvesting in and it's building, but then at what point do you draw the line, cut back and start to put that money back in your pocket, or do you keep going until it's massive? And it's not like you're earning some money from it, but in totality, maybe it's not making that much of a profit, even in terms of an entrepreneur standpoint.
Absolutely. And I think this is such an interesting topic because if you think about just the entrepreneurial world in general, I would bet that the majority of people have faced a decision like this at some point in time, right? Maybe not exact same market, exact same industry, whatever the case may be, but you have to have this, it's like a turning point where you have to decide, which fork am I going to take? Am I going to go right or am I going to go left? And this is, I'll just say this. So on my own journey, as I was really building out my coaching, that it was similar where things were taking off really quickly. I was getting good referrals and had a very consistent stream of people coming my way. And I remember at one point in time, I'm writing a book right now and I'm writing about this particular story. So it's front of mind. But this one particular time, I remember I was at home and I'm sitting at my desk and I look at the clock and it's 2:00 in the morning. And I had papers everywhere. I was working on this project for one of my clients. And from the get-go, in my heart, I knew that this was not the right alignment. It was a very lucrative relationship for me, but it was a nightmare at the same time. So I remember at 2:00 in the morning and I'm looking around and I knew that my kids were going to be up and literally within a few hours because they can't sleep in. They don't know the definition of sleeping in. So I'm sitting there and I just started crying and I was in such a state of overwhelm. And I'm looking around and I'm going, what am I doing? Yes, the money is coming in and yes, this is growing and this is thriving, but I'm miserable. I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel content. I don't feel happy right now. Like I'm draining myself and I'm actually taking myself away from what I've deemed to be important. So coming out of that, one of the things that I sat down and did, I think about the book Vivid Vision. It's by Cameron Herold. Personally, I think it's one of the best kind of visioning exercises because it mixes the whole high level all the way down into really tactical advice. So when I think about your situation and what you're talking about with, do I continue to build or do I stop and just reap the benefits of this? Or what does this look like? For me, I had to get crystal clear on what my vision for my future looked like. Was it full of hustle constantly and sleepless nights and just grind and hope that you can keep and retain and find great people to fill some of these spots? Or did I want to go after something that was a little bit more heart-centered, that actually fueled my purpose, that fueled consistent, endless energy, and maybe not have it happen as fast, but have it be really something that makes me fulfilled and makes me happy and all that good stuff. When I went back and I went through that visioning exercise again, it was total clarity for me. And interestingly enough, I'm a big believer that once you put something out into the universe, can't help but make that happen. So regardless of what a person's faith or beliefs are, you can look at it from the perspective of the universe. And for me, I had sat down and I was like, okay, I need to stop the coaching. I need to go all in on a couple different directions with the core Sweet Financial business. I have a platform that I want to build for career-minded women who have kids at home. And it was turning into a distraction. So within a really short period of time, after I made that decision for myself, I was going to sit down and have a conversation with these clients. This high one that was causing me some stress actually called me up one day and was like, oh, unfortunately, my financials have changed. I don't think I can afford you anymore. And I was like, thank you. It was one of those things that I was just like, gosh, like I'm so grateful for the experience, but I am so grateful to be done with it. So it was one of those things where I didn't have to have that tough conversation. And I truly believe it's because I just made up my mind. I made up my mind and that natural progression happened. So I know that it's a little bit long-winded, but I think it's just getting really clear on what's the life you want. What do you not want? What will you not tolerate? What's going to make you feel depleted? And then you have to make some tough decisions as you back into that vision or back down from that vision. So hopefully that helps.
I love that. Thank you for the wonderful advice. As you were sharing that, I had a few points come up to mind, and it's like you started to question. No, I started to question myself with what you were bringing up to me, and I was thinking, okay, what do I enjoy, and what do I want to do? And Brittany, I love the process as an entrepreneur. I love being in the field, and I love building. And it's not so much the end goal for me in terms of having X amount of places or X amount of things or X amount of wealth. It's more that continuation of it, because that process gives me energy. It gives me purpose to wake up and go, all right, let's continue to build that, or let's try to complete this project together as a team. And that hard part, it fuels me. At the same time, though, I think it's also a constant check-in, because I don't have a family yet, and I've got this endless time and energy at the moment. But as you're much more experienced and have gone through the experience, when you start a family, the trajectory may change. I may not have so much time and energy on my hands to constantly go through that process. That vision may have to change depending. I can't see it changing, but maybe circumstances have to shift my decisions in the future. But
I think regardless, it really boils down to value alignment. And so there's plenty of, I think about that's just my own situation where I was looking at it going, I value the time over the money or the chase. And there's brilliant entrepreneurs out there that are like, I love the chase and the time I'm cool with it. I don't mind having to be away or whatever that is. And their structure and their home life and everything is different. I think that's what's so beautiful about the entrepreneurial world in general, is that you have the ability to decide what your values are. And I think if you have that foundation, everything else becomes a lot clearer. And I liken it, and I'll totally botch this, but Roy Disney, who was actually the brother of Walt Disney, he was the behind the scenes guy in the whole entity and the buildup and everything. But he has a quote that said something along the lines of, once you decide what your values are, making decisions becomes a lot easier. And I think that's true for anybody, especially the entrepreneurial space, when you're making massive decisions, things that can absolutely catapult or destroy your future, depending upon which way you go. So I think that value alignment and just having that as your foundation of everything going forward, that's really the catalyst for growth and the catalyst for the right types of opportunities.
Great advice, Brittany. It really is. In the entrepreneurial space, there are so many decisions to be made. Which direction should you go? What branding should it be? What audience? And all this stuff. And if you don't have that core value or that vision, that North Star to really guide you, it becomes so confusing and challenging. And they become overwhelmed, and you don't know what you're doing. And then that's when that downward spiral starts to begin. So it's a great point on getting people to really think about their core values and envisioning their future to see where they want to head with this, thinking with the end in mind, essentially.
Yeah.
we're going to take a turn on this conversation, Brittany, and we're going to go to way before you were talking about saving. And I wanted to ask just like a kind of an odd question, but are there any expenditures that once seemed frivolous to you before, but now make perfect sense?
So I liken this back to the whole concept of decisions that we were just talking about and decision fatigue. It's funny because you can make monumental decisions all day long in your business and get home. And what is the hardest question to answer? What's for dinner? So for me, something that may have seemed frivolous or unnecessary was like home food orders with I think about HelloFresh or all of the different Freshly and all those things out there. Past me would have been like, oh, that's a waste. I'm perfectly capable of going to the grocery store and planning it out. I will tell you right now, that is one of the best investments I have ever made, is letting somebody else plan my meals, pick my vegetables, how long it would take me to sit there and choose a couple carrots. Like, that's ridiculous. So now I love it that it comes in a beautiful box once a week, all bagged up individually, and I don't have to think about it. So that's something for me that has been life-changing.
Oh, wow. It's I can't say I've gotten into it as much as you have, but it's such a big business. It really is such a big business.
It is. And I'm telling you, the working mothers of the world, oof, whoever decided to do that, and I should probably research that and actually get in touch with this person, but man, brilliant.
I can imagine. Great model. And it's, yeah.
Smart.
Absolutely. And at the time of this recording, the world is still going through this COVID-19 pandemic. And it has been a challenging time for a lot of people. In your shoes, what are some tips you could share for people going through these tough times at the moment?
Yeah, I liken this to being in the industry that I'm in. Sometimes, especially when times are really hard and when you are faced with insurmountable uncertainty, making short-term decisions can be something that can be detrimental to your future. I think about what we faced with the COVID-19 pandemic and everything that's happened and the really sad stories and the scary stuff. And now what's continued on and felt like this crazy rat race that none of us can get out of. It kind of feels like this giant global experiment where everybody's, I don't know what's happening next. What's coming? Is it the fireballs? Is it the plague? Is it, I don't know, whatever. I think something that we can all choose to focus on are the things that we can control. And unfortunately, there's a lot that's gone on in the world in the last few years that are completely outside of our control. Unless you're making massive decisions to get into the health space to completely try to mitigate what's gone on with the pandemic, or you're choosing to get into politics or whatever that is, a lot of this stuff is completely outside of our control. One thing that we talk about with our clients a lot is that, yeah, we need to honor and acknowledge what's gone on, but we also need to pivot and focus on what your goals are. What do you see for your future? And I think that can help people make better decisions and not get caught in this short-term reactive state, but rather stay in that proactive state of mind. So that's something that we talk about consistently. And it's interesting because I reflect back to the 2008-2009 market downturn, right? The markets dropped exponentially. People were really scared. They were unsure of what was going to happen. They're watching their whole entire life savings just plummet if they were invested and all of that. And I think if you were old enough to be in a position to remember that or feel that direct impact, you had retirees that thought, oh my gosh, am I not going to have enough money now? What happened is the people that stood the course, that kept their goals in mind, that didn't get scared, that didn't make reactionary decisions, what we saw is they fared out well, because what does history usually show? That things come back, right? Like, you can't ever guarantee it, but statistically, you look at the charts, you look at the time periods, you look at the course of how many different years, and it comes back. So I think that a couple things there is focusing on what you can control, setting goals and being intentional for your future, and just deciding that there are things in life that you just can't have direct impact over, And that's okay. The other thing too, and this is a little bit of a sidebar, but honestly, shutting off the news. I can't think of times too often where you flip on the news and after an hour, you're like, wow, I feel so much better about my life. Most of the time, it's like the doom and gloom and the dire stuff and things that are scary and the world's coming to an end and everybody's horrible and there's all these terrible humans out there. And it's exhausting. The human brain was not made to be able to take on the weight of the world like that. When you look at the true ramifications coming out of the pandemic, you look at some of the statistics and like anxiety is through the roof and depression is through the roof. And there was a period there where suicide rates went up and all of those things. And I think if people just shut off the noise and tuned into something positive, we decided actually, the founder, Brian Sweet and I, we were talking about this exact topic through the pandemic. And we're like, how do you create something that is just strictly positive, focused on what you can control? So we launched a podcast this year and we're like, what? If the news is going to keep going down this dark path, we're going to choose to create something that is uplifting, that's inspiring, and that helps people just think a little bit different. I think that's one big thing, is just tuning out the media. Unfortunately, it's hard to know what's truth and what's not anymore. Yeah. So I think that if you can just focus on the things that are immediate to you and your goals and your future, that it just helps you stay the course.
Yeah, it's so true, Brittany. Amanda's often refers to the news as, well, CNN as a crisis news network. You know, it's this constant negativity, and and like you said, we don't really know what's true or not anymore. There's so many things that have been blinded to us. It's challenging,
yeah,
and really, and it's such a beautiful perspective of really trying to only focus on what you can and what you can control rather than what you cannot control. It's when we're thinking about things that we can't control, we're thinking about a fearful future, that's when all of that anxiety, depression starts to set in.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's different parts of the world are going through different things at the moment, but hopefully, if anything, that's taught us is a lot of things that are outside of control. Like in Australia at the moment, the COVID pandemic was one thing. We had floods recently and different other countries, and you can see the news about Ukraine, and there's so many things going on around the world. It really shows that you are not in complete control of everything, but you focus on what you can for yourself or for the people around you. At least you can do your part in that.
Yep. Yeah. I think I don't want to go too on you here. If you think about it, if people were more focused on making a positive impact in their tiny part of the world, and that's what every human being was focused on, think about the impact that could make. So starting that kind of wave of thought and wave of mindset, I just think you want to make a global impact. It starts with you and it starts at home. So yeah, you absolutely can be in tune to what's going on, and you can honor what's going on and respect that it's hard, and people, you're dead on. There's all parts of the world where people are facing adversity and challenge and horrible things. But if you become fixated on it, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when you kind of lose sight of where your focus should be.
That's true. That's absolutely right. I and some close people a few months ago decided that we wanted to raise some funds through visual campaigns and create artworks and raise funds for them, because we want to fight the climate change. We want action against climate change, and we want to. And at the time, later on, as we were raising funds and then the Ukraine issue broke out, we thought the money that we raised, why don't we can directly donate it straight to Ukraine, and we're living in interesting times, and we're able to now pool our own funds and raise funds to donate to different green startups in this space that are making a difference and moving the needle forward. So it can be done, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can absolutely do it. It may be a small contribution. Small contributions over time with the collective community can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And man, those are the stories that need to be shared. Exactly what you just talked about. There's so much good in this world, and there are so many good people who are doing amazing things and looking outside of themselves to how they can help and what can they immediately impact and control. I love hearing stuff like that because I think there's a lot of it. And I think, unfortunately, that's not what's put out there as often as the stuff that gets people's attention. So that's amazing.
And also, good on you guys for starting up the podcast to share positive news and like things that they can do, people can action on. It's great to hear that.
Yeah.
Talking about financial decisions in Australia in particular, and I don't know, some different parts of the world, saving is one thing. Like you said, like people are worried about spending and they're trying to save. And there's also this scarcity mindset going on at the moment where they're like, oh, we have to rush out and buy a house, or because the prices are skyrocketing. It's clearly in this massive bubble. What's your perspective on renting versus owning a home?
Yeah, I think it really goes back to what stage and where a person is at in their life and what their particular goals are. I will say there's absolutely professionals out there who are experts in the real estate space who know the ins and outs, and they may advise buy, buy, buy. And then there's other people who are maybe more focused on like the long-term traditional investing, and they're going to go that route. So I think when you're looking at the decision between renting and buying, you really have to just assess longevity in the space. How long are you going to be in the area? What do you see for yourself in the future? Are you set up to make that, or do you want to make that an investment? Or is it something that is long-term for you? There's plenty of ways, and I'm by no means the expert at this by any stretch of the imagination, but there's definitely ways that you can turn real estate into investment opportunities where you're able to buy, live in it for a period of time, or buy it, flip it, buy it, rent it, whatever that looks like. When I think about it from my own perspective, for a period of time, I was a landlord and I hated the process. Even having somebody that can take care of the maintenance and that kind of thing, so I don't have to worry about it, it's still just one more thing for me that I had to think about, worry about, whatever. So personally, I made the decision that's not the route, at least at that point in my life, that I wanted to go anymore. Others absolutely thrive on it. They love that space. They love the chaos that comes with it. And that's what gets them out of bed in the morning. Again, if you go back to just the whole rent versus buy, you really have to look at your own individual situation. Are you set up to be able to put that down payment onto the house to make it make sense as far as making it an investment so that you're not house poor? That's one thing that when you look at the difference between that spending and saving and having that happy medium, it's one thing to want to have a nice home, but there's another thing to make it so that that's the only thing that you can have. And again, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. It's a really self-assessment. I wish there was some sexy piece of advice I could give in that, but I really don't think that there truly is. I think there's a million different ways you can look at it. And you just got to look at what your goals are. How long are you going to be in the area? What do you want to turn it into? What's the end game? And then make your decision from there.
Thank you for shedding light on that, Brittany.
Yeah.
And being an expert in your field, normally we would go down some positive advice, but also I like to look at things that people can avoid. What are, for example, 3 financial mistakes people can avoid?
3 financial mistakes. I think short-term thinking. That's one of the big things there is if you're constantly in a reactionary state, that can create a lot of unnecessary chaos in your life and a lot of unnecessary pain. So really playing the long game. I know it's a little bit more of the boring route and it's not the exciting chase. I liken it. And there's been studies done around this where you look at somebody who's constantly watching their portfolio, making a lot of changes, they kind of play the markets, that whole thing. And then you look at the people who have this steadfast long-term strategy where it may not be as exciting, but it's consistent. And a lot of times what can happen is that it ends up the same. So you have this, again, it is a personality play a little bit there too, but it's like, how much energy and effort do you want to put around it? So I think just having that short-term focus and thinking that it's going to get you light years ahead, it's kind of like gambling. Like sometimes you hit the jackpot and it's really good. And other times let's just say you do the opposite, where things are not as good and you end up losing and that's not fun or fulfilling for anybody. So I think that's one thing is short-term. I also think that it goes back to what I talked about earlier. The second point would be saving too much. And I think this happens more so when you don't have an advisor that's looking at the long game for you. For example, we've gotten people before that have an interest. We're in southern Minnesota in the United States, and it can be really stinking cold here in the winter time. On an actual temperature day, you can get down to like -30, -40, sometimes even colder than that. Wow. And it's not ideal. So you get people that are like, I don't want to be here in the winters anymore. They want to go south. So they'll be looking at some sort of an investment property. Airbnb, those are all becoming more and more popular. So you've got people making decisions around that. You can go and you can stay in it for a period of time, and then you can rent it out under this entity the rest of the year. There's different management companies that can take care of all the pain. Yada. What we'll see happening though is that people will be hesitant to make a purchase like that when you work with an advisor and you can create a scenario that says, hey, if you make this decision, this is how it will impact your plan in black and white. No fluff. It's just simple numbers. But people just don't take the time to put that much effort or thought into it. So then they end up not doing it, not taking action. Because again, they go back to that scarcity or fear-based mindset where they think, oh gosh, I don't think we can afford it, or I think this is going to actually hurt us, or what if some other opportunity comes up? And people end up freezing and actually spending less. So again, I think that is the second mistake. The third mistake I think people make is just waiting too long. And I know this kind of goes back to finance 101. If you look at, I think about just different successful people that I know in my own life and even my own path. I started really young, just putting money away, making sure that I was diligent, that it was set it and forget it, that money doesn't mean it's sitting there for a rainy day when I'm bored and I want a new purse because Lord knows I love my good purses, but that's not what that money's for. So I think when people look at creating for their future and creating possibility, they're waiting until kind of that right moment to save. Or once I get to this point, then I'll start tucking things away. And you're just losing precious opportunity and precious time. So again, that's finance 101, but it's a mistake that as many articles and resources and things and charts out there that can show you the benefit of being diligent early on, people still don't always listen to it. So I would say that's mistake number 3.
Yeah. Love it. Back to basics and some really good mindsets and also strategies to put in place for anyone and everyone, really. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for young people wanting to start a business or a side hustle?
Yeah. The first thing that came to my mind there is don't just get into it for the money. And I think that there's a lot of times, especially if you tend to be entrepreneurial by nature, where there's very few opportunities that are not attractive to you, where you've got maybe a little bit of that shiny object syndrome where it's, oh, that looks good and that looks good. And oh, that could really get me ahead. I think playing on something or starting something that truly creates some source of fulfillment for you, something that is impact driven, making decisions, again, working backwards from your vision. I think about multiple different times in my life where I could have pivoted and gone very different directions, but holding true to the vision that I have of that complete freedom, like I talked about in the beginning of this conversation, complete freedom of time, of money, of energy, of my attention. It's really helped me turn down some maybe lucrative opportunities, but things that would absolutely have gone against the grain of what I'm trying to accomplish. If you're getting into business, I think making sure that you're making your decisions for the right reasons. Now, the one caveat to that is if your whole focus is on the money game, like that's what your core value is and that's what you're after, then you might have a little bit of a different path. I've been seldom to find that be the true one core value for an individual. But if that is you, that's fine. And then you're going to make your decisions a little bit different. But I think just making sure you're not going after it for that sole reason and that you're actually doing something that gets you excited, I think that's really where you can generate true opportunity and where you're going to have endless energy to work on it. And it's not going to feel so heavy. That's not to say that there are not times that you sit there and you question and you maybe have to go into the fetal position because things are rough. Because anytime you start a new business, there's bumps in the road. It's not all roses and sunshine. But when you do it on something that's heart-centered, I think that makes a world of difference.
Yeah, I completely agree. Definitely, because they will be always setbacks, and unless it's and unless you're truly passionate about it and concerning yourself with the outcome of the impact that you're going to make as the North Star, you're going to pull back very quickly if you can't work through those points. So again, great advice, Brittany.
Yeah. And I got to add this one thing that it always sticks with me when it comes to thinking about business and opportunity. I believe it was actually from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. We're talking about the story of the gold miner and the guy who he dug and finally just threw in the towel and was like, this is enough. I can't do it anymore. And the next guy came in and what was it like? It was like 6 inches down or something ridiculous and struck the largest gold find in the history of ever. And I liken that to when you're starting in business, when you have something that, like you said, it makes like those bumps in the road, it makes them a lot more bearable when you're doing something that fuels your passion and your energy so that you're not that guy or that gal who got just inches away from the biggest life-changing event in your life. it keeps you going.
Yeah.
So I teeter, there's like this fine line, especially for new business. There's this fine line between knowing when to say no, because there is merit to that, and not just throwing in the towel because it's hard. So I had to pull that out too.
Absolutely. I love that story. Man, how pissed would you be if you were
Oh my gosh, I would be so mad. I would never sleep again.
Brittany, you have an amazing story that you've shared before. And in looking you up, you've got all the success and name in the media. And I'm sure it always hasn't been this way. Was there a pivotal point on your journey where things had just taken off? If you can share that with us, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's again, the story of the overnight success. It never really happens that way. It's a lot of years of blood, sweat, and tears. And honestly, the media attention and all of those great things, it's still humbling. Some of that stuff that gets put out there and stories that get picked up and all of those opportunities, it's just, yeah, it's humbling. I can't think of another word that describes it more. I would say that I have to liken it back to, and I'll share this story in particular that kind of is this catalyst for growth for myself. So when I was hired into Sweet Financial, I mentioned there's a funny story there. I realized really quickly that the client service, the concierge service component of what I was doing, like I loved the clients, loved the people. It was not where my heart was, and it was not what was going to keep me fulfilled forever. So I really wanted to get back into some sort of leadership role, something where I felt like I could make an even bigger difference in what my path was in my journey. So actually at the time, the operations manager, director of operations, whatever you want to call her, she was getting ready to leave. She was going to go move closer to her kids, and they hired a recruiter. So they hired this recruiter, and they're trying to find this like high level operations COO type person. They're offering a Mercedes, they're offering a moving bonus, like all of these things to get somebody into this role. And sheepish, young 20-something Brittany comes up, and I let the manager at the time know, I was like, I really want a shot at this. This is what I was doing before I came here. And I know I don't know the industry in and out, but I know what I'm capable of. So they allowed me to have an interview with the recruiter, and the recruiter went to Brian, the founder, and was like, what are you doing? Just put Brittany in this. Stop this crazy chase. And so he was really reluctant. He was like, I don't know about this. Obviously, time will tell. That panned out to be a really good thing. And to this day, I never got that darn Mercedes. So that's where the funny twist comes in. Like, I worked here, so I didn't get the Mercedes. What the heck? Brian and I still joke about that today. I think about that moment. I was terrified, like honest to goodness. I was terrified of stepping into that role because I knew, like, Brian, very entrepreneurial nature. He is absolutely the epitome of the squirrel chaser and the shiny objects, and he's a lot. And I knew stepping into that it was going to force me to level up and level up in a way that I maybe didn't even really understand at the time. So when I think back and I think about these turning points, working closely with Brian and taking that on, he basically allowed me to go into strategic coach. Dan Sullivan, the founder out of Toronto and Chicago, are the main headquartered offices, became part of that, introduced to the entrepreneurial world and fell in love. And then Brian and I decided to join Genius Network with Joe Polish. He's the founder of Genius Network of Piranha Marketing. So got into that and met the most incredible people. So I think about that. And honestly, where some of this pivot has come from, it's meeting the brilliant people, like we talked about earlier, the Justin Breens of the world, the Joe Polishes of the world, the Dan Sullivans, and honestly, Brian Sweet. It's those people that have really opened the door. And while I have absolutely put in the work and I have the grit, and I'm not afraid to say that, if I wouldn't have been put in front of some of those people and had the courage to take a chance, none of the media recognition and the progress in my career and the highlights and the spotlights and all of these really amazing things that have happened, none of that would have come to fruition if those kind of circumstances hadn't happened and hadn't been put in place. So I guess the moral of the story there is I am a firm believer in overcoming fear and actually letting it work to your advantage.
Yeah. That courage paid off in dividends, didn't it?
Amen. Yeah. Amen. It really has.
Incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing, Brittany. I totally agree with you in terms of this amazing network that you build around you with, like you said, the Genius Network and strategic coach, and meeting these amazing minds and people that almost don't force you, but they challenge you to level up. And because
Yeah.
you see where they are and the way that they think, the way they do things, and you're thinking, yes, maybe I should reconsider the way I'm doing things. So it really questions your state of
Yeah.
mind and your running operating system. So it's great to surround yourself with such incredible networks. Privilege.
I think too, Joe Polish, he has a saying that he talks about all the time about how life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. And that's something, I think I heard that in probably one of the first Genius Network, like in-person sessions that I went to. And when I was thinking about that for my own career and thinking about the people along the way, it's, man, that is so true. You think about it. Yeah, people who have that taker mentality might get ahead for a little bit, but the people who really win are the people that go into it with a pure heart, who want to give, who want to help, who want to serve, and want to make an impact. So that is something that I would also say is a huge contributor, is I try to live by the whole mantra. I think it's a Zig Ziglar thing. You help enough people get what they want, and in turn, you'll get what you want. So I think just living life that way and staying committed to that thought process.
Yeah, that's a beautiful state to live in. And I think the more people we can get on board living that truth, the world can be in much better state as well.
Yeah.
Reaching towards the tail end of our interview, Brittany, there's always a couple of questions I always ask our guests. Do you have a favorite movie or books that you'd love to recommend to the audience?
Let's see. I got to go with recency here too on this one, because I will say for the listeners, I'm an avid reader. I love reading, have from a young age. One of them that comes to mind is Robin Sharma's The 5 a.m. Club. Have you read that one, Kevin?
I haven't read The 5 a.m. Club, but I am familiar with Robin Sharma's work.
Yeah. If for anybody that's listening, if you haven't read anything from Robin Sharma, you absolutely should. He has such a unique way of writing, and one that gets you just engrossed in this story, but yet teaches you so many lessons along the way. So that's one that, again, recency, I absolutely have fallen in love with. And I think that it has so many principles to teach you and really make you think at a whole different level. The other one, and this plays more on my hard-driven mama soul, and that it's called Present Over Perfect. And the gal would be, it's like Shauna Nyquist, I think is the author. It's really just one of those things. And I think I say that from a mama perspective because I am one, but I think anybody who has found themselves struggling to really be present in the moment and to understand just how profoundly important it is to stay grounded and to not be so future focused. I'm so darn guilty of that. My husband and I have joked before that he's like the person that kind of brings me back to planet Earth, because I'm constantly thinking about the next, like what's going to happen in the future. And this book in particular just really gave me great perspective on, hey, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to just be. It's okay to not have to be doing something all of the time, and to really help that internal perfectionist. I'm a recovering perfectionist, I would say, to really allow yourself to be present. So those are two books I just personally love and have really made a profound impact in my life.
Great recommendations, Brittany. Being present, everyone can use more of that. We live in such a world of distraction now, phones and media, and it's an exciting time to be alive, absolutely, but also a time full of distraction as well.
Amen.
Being grounded and present is such an important thing, which we could all use more of. So thank you for that suggestion. Definitely look into that. And with the Robin Sharma one, are you now part of the 5 a.m. club, Brittany?
I'm getting there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm creating my own path there. But yeah, I've definitely put some of the principles in place. I've joked before that you can have the best intentions for a morning routine. When you're a mom of 3 young children, sometimes they determine your morning routine. But no, my oldest and I, she's 8, and she has gotten into morning yoga routines with me, which has been so fun. And it's just our time together while her 2 younger siblings, they get the rest that they need.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any new beliefs or behaviors that have had a positive impact in your life in the recent years?
Let's see. One of the first things that comes to mind here is that it's okay to say no. That's something that I have been for years. And this is actually something that I've been like publicly recognized for, is like my ability to say yes. And I'm a doer. And I'm one of those people that whatever you put in front of me, I'm going to take it on and I'm going to tackle. And for me, I've really come to the conclusion that the more that I can say no, the more peaceful my life is and the more focused it is. And actually, that's where true progress tends to happen, is when I have that kind of filter to be able to say, hey, this is a great opportunity, but does it really serve, like we talked about with the vision, does it really serve that greater purpose that I have? Is this going to get in the way of the relationships that I value or the projects that I'm working on that are truly pivotal and truly moving to me that I know are going to make a great impact? I would say that's one thing that has shifted, is that yes does not mean success. No, I think actually breeds more opportunity.
Great. It's very sound advice. Absolutely. I think a lot of us grow up in a society that promotes us to wanting to please others and constantly say yes. But absolutely, I feel the same. The older I get, the more I find important that saying no is actually more important.
Yeah. And it's funny too. If you think back to, I think about my own childhood. And for me, I was that kid that constantly, if I was, taking on a new project at school or diving into some extracurricular, or I worked from a super young age. So it was like that constant drive for more, like that has replicated itself and compounded itself over time as I've gotten older. And you start to equate, okay, the only way that I'm going to achieve success or recognition or love even is if I'm doing, right? If I'm constantly doing and I'm creating and I'm generating whatever it is. And so I think that it's this kind of realization, like you said, you get a little bit older and you're like, that's actually not what matters most. And you learn to just protect your peace. It becomes not just important, it becomes necessary.
Yes, absolutely. If you could only send one single line of SMS text to yourself 5 years ago, what would it be, Brittany?
5 years ago. Let's see here. I think it would be never let fear or self-doubt get in the way from what you really want.
Great message. I think you could mass text that out to a lot of people, not just yourself.
I'm like, maybe I need to actually text that to myself or something right now, not just 5 years. Oh gosh.
Finally, Brittany, how can people reach out or learn more about you?
Sure. So one way, you can go to sweetfinancial.com. It's SWT. There's a contact page form. You can click on team and you'll see my face there. You can also email me, Brittany@sweetfinancial.com. And finally, I do have my own personal website as well, BrittanyAnderson.com. A few different methods, and I always respond. So if you have a burning question, if you have a thought, I'd love to hear from people.
Thank you, Brittany, so much for coming onto the show, sharing your time, knowledge, and wisdom. I truly enjoyed this conversation, as I found it very energizing and reminded me of many concepts that I need to get back to myself as well. Again, appreciate it so much. Thank you. Thank you, Brittany.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. All the links to the show notes will be available at kevinleesocial.com, spelled KEVINLY. Conversely, if you have any interviews that you'd love to recommend, please send it over to kevinleesocial@gmail.com. I'd love to connect. Thank you. Until the next episode.